Introducing National Streaming Sports, live and on-demand sports talk programming that you can access 24/7. Check us out on YouTube, Facebook, and X. And for the premier sports talk experience, tap into our Roku channel. Start your mornings with Mac and Jack covering all the weekend sports action. Then pour a cup and enjoy all the sports you can drink on the Coffee and Sports podcast. At midday, talk sports from east to west on the Coast to Coast podcast. Followed at night by some hot girl talk with Prim and Proper Sports featuring Sonia Pearson. Talk boxing on the Gloved Fist. Yankee fans tune in for Start Spreading the News. And there's more on the College Sports Huddle and Sports Scope with Robert Butler. And that's just a sampling. There are 20 podcasts in all and 70 weekly shows giving us a 3.4-star viewer rating. To find us on Roku TV, search for National Streaming Sports on the Roku search bar. Click on the logo and you're in. For laptops, mobile phones, and tablets, download the Roku app. National Streaming Sports, live and on-demand sports talk for America.
This show is brought to you by BetUS.com. 125% off your first 3 deposits, 30 years experience, secure site, wagering for all sports, including during the games and futures. SeatGeek provides you the best prices on sports and music events, game tickets, and concerts. Use NSS promo code to get $20 off your first ticket. Keep using the NSS promo code when purchasing tickets for great deals in the future. In Fanatics at nessp.info for your favorite teams, sportswear. Click on the link, and while you're there, check out our national streaming sports merchandise. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Sports Memory Show. I'm your host, Mac, with your co-host, James, the J Train, and Jack Hirsch. As you saw, we flashed some of the greatest players in history up on the screen before we go in. So we're going to get a great show for you tonight. James is going to start us off with former San Francisco quarterback, John Brodie.
Yeah, Mac. I got into this research on this guy, and it just made me think, like, wow, there were really a lot of quarterbacks or players. Hold on one second. Hello? Yeah. Man, it's just...
James is finishing up his research now, I think, getting the last little bit in. Yeah.
Good. See, maybe you're echoing. Is that what it is? Try and talk.
Yeah, I was echoing. It's good. It's better now.
Okay.
Can you still hear it? Okay. So, look, there are a lot of great players that didn't make the Hall of Fame, and John Brodie is one of those guys. He started at Stanford, and he had a relatively good career there. He made all PCC his junior and senior year, and he made All-America his senior year. Great enough to be drafted number 3 overall in the first round by the San Francisco 49ers. He didn't really start off well. He played, but I found that when doing some research that a lot of quarterbacks, they played by committee back then. They would play guys. They didn't play one guy in some teams, and that was interesting. That he played some, but he played behind another great in Y.A. Tittle. And I remember Y.A. Tittle. For some reason, someone talked about him one day, and I found out he was a great LSU quarterback, and that made me have a lot more respect for him. But going back to John Brodie was better suited for Howard. The coach then was Howard Red Hickey, and he invented or started the shotgun offense, and Brodie was better suited for that style of play with his accurate passing and his air to play in the air raid offense. And so he was the guy utilized during later in, I think he played on and off from 1958 to 1960, and they traded Tittle to New York Giants. And once he got traded, that's when he began to play in the shotgun offense, even though it didn't do too well with them, but he still was the man. And so by 1965, this is when he really was at his peak. He got a comeback player of the year that year. He threw for 3,112 yards, 30 touchdowns, and they had a really good season, got to one of his first 2 Pro Bowls of his career. And he continued to play well, but that year in 1965, he was making about $35,000 a year. And so there was a little bit of a contract dispute there. And the Houston Oilers were courting him, and they wanted to give him between a $600,000 to $1 million for his contract, which is a multi-year contract back then. To me, that sounds, these guys make minimum now with $900,000 a year, but that was a multi-year contract for him back then. And so San Francisco was able to match it and gave him $900,000 for a multi-year deal. And from then, he just kept elevating, man, having really good years. In 1970, he got to his peak. He got MVP honors that year, and they actually made the playoffs. They made the playoffs and won a game against Minnesota. So he was an MVP, got 2,971 yards. That doesn't sound like much now, but that's a lot back then, because they said that, what I understand when I did some research, the average quarterback had a completion percentage of 49%. That's abysmal today. But back then, that was really good. And he was above average. I think he had like 59% or something like that. And he had a passer rating of 93, and he had 24 touchdowns and 2.6% interception percentage. Man, great season. They won the playoffs. They won their first playoff game against in a division round against Minnesota, and then met a wall. They met a wall in the NFC Championship against Dallas. They lost that game. Went again to the playoffs again in 71. Met Dallas in the NFC Championship. Lost that game. 1972, they get to the playoffs again. Guess who they meet? They meet Dallas, but they're winning. They're winning into the fourth quarter. They're 28-13, and the quarterback that's playing against them is a guy named Morton. You guys would tell me whoever that guy was.
Martin, I remember that game, actually, the specifics that day. Yeah. Tom Landry, when it was 28-13.
28-13.
He elected to go for field goal when people thought he should have gone for a touchdown to make it 28-16. And then Dallas, Roger Staubach came in and got rapid-fire touchdowns in the closing minutes to pull the game out.
In 90 seconds, but mind you, it took a little bit of luck to get an onside kick so they can get the ball back and actually do that. But yes, it was 90 seconds. Roger Staubach, the other number 12, came back and won that game, and that was pretty devastating for them. But after that, this is when the decline came. And over his career, he played 17 seasons. He had really good moments. And as you can see, he had an MVP season, a comeback player of the year. But he had a total of 17. He had a total of 31,000 yards, man. He threw 214 touchdowns, but he also threw 224 interceptions. His completion percentage was about 55%, and he rushed for 1,100 yards and had another 22 touchdowns on the ground. But over the course of 17 seasons, that really doesn't sound like a lot.
How many years did John Brodie have in the NFL?
17 seasons. 17 seasons.
I'll admit, when you started off, James, talking, and you said he wasn't in the Hall of Fame, I was kind of surprised. I mean, I would have to look at his line of stats, because I remember him as a player, what he did. He was a franchise quarterback, really good quarterback, good passer. It just as 49, the teams couldn't get over the top.
It wasn't just him. There was a lot of things that came into play. I mean, you look at Roger Staubach. When they mentioned that team, a lot of the names like that I mentioned, they also mentioned like people like Calvin Hill, some of these other running backs that were on the team, and some of the defensive linemen. A lot of guys were there. You don't really hear, except Jimmy Johnson, I think they mentioned, was a defensive back that played for the 49ers. I don't hear a lot of great names that were surrounding him. So, I mean, yes, he was a very good quarterback.
I'm a little surprised he was not in the Hall of Fame. I'm not saying he should necessarily be there, but that would have been my assumption if you told me one way, asked me one way or the other, whether I thought he was in the Hall of Fame. I would have said yes. Yes, I was a little surprised.
Well, I think not getting to a Super Bowl probably in his situation probably what hurts him. You've been to got to the playoffs. They didn't get there to the Super Bowl.
He played in the era before the Super Bowl too. It overlapped.
Say that again.
They didn't have an NFL championship before the Super Bowl was played. I mean, he quarterbacked the 49ers as well.
Right. He got to 2 straight NFC championships, but they were against Dallas. Dallas was just in their way. They got to 2 NFC championships. They just didn't win them. But his numbers, see, now you look now. I mean, I guess back then, because when he finished, he was 3rd in yards to Tarkenton and to Johnny Unitas. So if you look at it from that standpoint, from back then, this is a guy that probably should have been in the Hall of Fame at that time. He probably should have been at that time, because now you look at his numbers for the eyes from someone that my perspective, who's 49 and who's seen a lot of guys since then have surpassed those numbers, man. I would be looking like, wow, he doesn't deserve to get in. But if I had to look at it from that standpoint, when he played and who he finished behind, then he probably should have been. But I mean, we look at those 2 guys. Tarkenton, he led in a lot of stats when he retired. I mean, like number 1, and Johnny Unitas had 3 Super Bowls and 3 MVPs. Yeah. And so it's just really hard. I can see why he didn't get in, but I can also see why people were advocating, because someone like Trent Dilfer, when he played for them, they unretired his number. And I'm like, why does Trent Dilfer get his number? But what I found out is that he was trying to advocate for John Brodie to get people to recognize this guy played for them. And he wanted to show the number off again. But other than that, I mean, he also, let's not just talk about football. This guy was an athlete. He also played golf.
He was better at golf than football. That was
he considered going into golf from right out of Stanford.
Golf,
He considered going into golf right out of Stanford. And let's not to mention, even though this may be a honorable mentioning thing, he also is in what's called the Professional Football Researchers Association Hall of Very Good that started in 2004. I don't know if that's a great thing to be honored.
Very good.
I didn't even know there was there's a Hall of Very Good, and he was inducted in 2004, the second class. It started in 2002, and it still exists to this day.
If I had to compare him to someone, let me throw this to Mac. I would compare him to Kirk Cousins. Maybe he was a hair better than Kirk Cousins, or the same. When Kirk Cousins retires, he'll have a case for the Hall of Fame. Maybe he gets in, maybe he doesn't. But if Kirk Cousins plays, 5-6 more years, he's going to build a strong case on longevity. That's the guy I'd maybe compare John Brodie to. I think he was maybe a hair better, but you can make a debate for Cousins as well.
I think today Kirk Cousins would have to win a Super Bowl to get in. I think,
or at least a couple more playoff games.
Yeah, I mean, today it's really you're talking Hall of Very Good, but I mean, as far as to get in as a Hall of Famer, I think he would need a Super Bowl to get in.
Well, not necessarily, not everyone. Lamar Jackson will get in someday, even if they don't go to a Super Bowl, because he would have the MVPs. If he has the longevity, that's what I mean.
Yeah. Right. I agree with that.
But Brodie, Mac, you'll agree, was one of the best quarterbacks of his era.
Very accurate. Very accurate. For his time. I mean, I'm trying to remember the wide receivers he had at that time. I don't know if he had Gene Washington there at the time.
Gene Washington,
Yeah, he might have had Gene Washington, who was a pretty good wide receiver.
Yeah, good one.
Yeah.
I can't remember the guy's name, number 18. I forgot who it was, but yeah, he was a guy he threw the ball to a lot. And he utilized his tight ends too as well.
But you needed to win to take the next step as a Hall of Fame. Like the St. Louis Cardinals had a good quarterback, Jim Hart, but they didn't go, the next step. They kind of, like Max says, sometimes you need the championship, and that's the difference between Hall of Fame and not. A guy like Lenny Dawson, I believe, is in the Hall of Fame. But the Chiefs won a Super Bowl with him and went to another one, and that's the difference. Dawson wasn't better than John Brodie.
No.
I don't think he was better, yet Dawson's in the Hall. He had the receivers like Otis Taylor, great defense led by Buck Buchanan, Willie Lanier. Brodie didn't have all that. And even from your New Orleans area, Archie Manning was outstanding. He's not a Hall of Famer because he didn't have any of the players around him like Roger Staubach had the players. That's the difference.
Big difference. Big difference.
Also, one more note. When they won their playoff game, it was the first ever in the franchise history with him as a quarterback. So they had never won a franchise. They had never won a playoff game ever.
Yeah. So we got Jack coming at us next with Carlton Fisk, former catcher for the Red Sox and White Sox. 11-time All-Star, Jack. Pretty good catcher.
Oh, yeah. Great catcher. He was overshadowed a bit by Johnny Bench because he played during Johnny Bench's era. And he was compared more with Thurman Munson, Fisk and Munson. And I think most objective observers maybe gave Fisk just a tiny, tiny edge. But Munson had the reputation playing with the Yankees. And Munson, tragically, his life was cut short. He wasn't able to put in a few more years. Fisk played an astounding 24 years. 1969 through 1993. He played 11 years with the Boston Red Sox, 13 with the Chicago White Sox. The Red Sox were going to retain him, but they fumbled the contract negotiations. He went to the White Sox. He had a dilemma. Carlton Fisk, when it came time to go into the Hall of Fame, they gave him the choice what he wanted to go in under, a Red Sox or the White Sox, and he decided he was going to go in with the Red Sox, even though he played a couple of years left. And I think it was a good move because I think when you think of Carlton Fisk, you think of him being a little more of a Red Sox than a White Sox because the Red Sox had better teams. And you also think of that iconic moment in the 1975 World Series Game 6 when he hit the home run. And talk about a moment defining someone's career for all he accomplished. That's what we think about with Carlton Fisk. The camera was focused on him when he hit the ball, and he's like waving it to go like this, like fast, stay fast, stay fair. And then it hits the foul pole. He throws his hands up. He runs excitedly around the bases. And it was one of those iconic moments like when Kirk Gibson hit the walk-off homer, coming to the plate. And sometimes moments define an athlete, and you hope it defines them positively, okay? I sometimes think when the Yankees retired Paul O'Neill's number, but imagine Paul O'Neill dropped the last out of David Wells' perfect game, and David Wells didn't get the perfect game. Paul O'Neill would have been defined by that one missed catch. I'm just giving an example. And the Yankees never would have retired his number. We know he wouldn't have been in the Yankee broadcast booth. But that one moment with Fisk was a very positive moment. He retired with a .269 batting average, very good for a catcher. He was moderate as far as on-base percentage. He had over 2,300 hits. His 376 career homers were the most by an active catch until, was surpassed by Bench, and over 1,300 RBIs. He had a bit of a falling out with the White Sox organization. And Carlton Fisk I don't want to say he had an abrasive personality. I don't know well enough. But he would have a go at it with people. And he had a go at it, I guess, with Jerry Reisendorf to the point where after Carlton Fisk retired, he visited the clubhouse and was told to leave. This is supposed to be an iconic player, But eventually things got patched up because he got inducted into the White Sox Hall of Fame, and he was made an ambassador by the White Sox later on. And he was also retired. His number retired, I believe, by the Red Sox as well. But both the White Sox and Red Sox number. For the Red Sox, he wore 27. For the White Sox, he wore 72. Because I guess another player was wearing 27 and they didn't want to upset anything. But he's in both the White Sox and Red Sox Hall of Fame. But as in Cooperstown, he went in wearing, the Red Sox cap. Him and Thurman Munson would have a bit of a rivalry. There was a bit of an edginess there, similar to what George Brett and Greg Nettles would have, the Yankees and Royals. They get into it. There was once a collision at home plate, and they were piling on, and fights were taking place. And he even got into an interaction called Fisk with Deion Sanders once when Deion Sanders was with the Yankees. No one thinks of Deion Sanders being a New York Yankee and not being a bad player either, with the Yankees. Deion Sanders, he had showmanship. He drew a dollar sign in the dirt. Then he hit a pop-up, and Deion Sanders just stood there. And Carlton Fisk, who was catching, got mad at him. Told him to get his rear end down to first base. You're disrespecting the game. And so Deion Sanders called Carlton Fisk a racist, which was stupid. It had nothing to do with it, but Deion being Deion. But in fairness to Deion, the only way I could defend him would be, was it Carlton Fisk's place to tell an opposing player to run to first base? It really wasn't Carlton Fisk's place to do it. It was Deion's teammates who should have taken him to task for that, not an opposing player. So according to Carlton Fisk, he was disrespecting the game. You got to honor the game a certain way. But again, was that Carlton Fisk's place to do it? But Carlton Fisk, 24 season, he was Rookie of the Year in 72, unanimous choice. Even though it was his first year in the league, it was his first year of eligibility. You had to have a certain amount of at-bats, and he never got that elusive world championship. 69 to 73. With the White Sox, they won the playoffs, but never got to a World Series when he was there. And with the Red Sox, and in 75, when he was there, to lose that heartbreaker to the Reds in 7 games. But, you could make if you put Carlton Fisk in the top 10 catchers of all time, the lower half, I don't think you'd get a big argument anywhere. I mean, I really don't. You have to put him a little behind Johnny Bench, Yogi Berra. He wasn't as good a hitter as Mike Piazza, even though Mike Piazza, I wasn't impressed with him defensively. You could put Carlton Fisk something on the level, him and Gary Carter. If you want to put him ahead of Gary Carter, it's okay. Or you could put him a little behind, that level. One of, the best to ever play the position. Long career. He once caught 25 innings in a game. Man, talk about, that is hard. Playing 25 innings in any position, that's backbreaking. But to be a catcher, that is arguably the hardest position to play, that these guys day in, day out behind the plate, would it take the toll it takes on you? But he had a 25-inning game, longest game of catching in Major League history. It's an all-time great, Carlton Fisk. Not one of my favorites, being a Yankee fan. I'm not going to say it's one of my favorites, but tremendous admiration I have for him.
Carlton did have some great players around him. Carl Yastrzemski, Butch Hobson. You had Jerry Remy back then, and the Rooster, and
Jim
Rice, Fred Lynn. There was some great players around him for a while there with the Red Sox. And I think, if it wasn't for the Reds, Jack, I think they would have won that World Series. I think if they went up against any other National League team that year, they would have won that World Series.
Well, you make a great point, Mac. There's so many outstanding teams. They just run into a team that's barely better. Barely. It doesn't mean they don't have a great team. That was the 75 Red Sox. They ran into the big red machine that was due to win a championship, and they just got edged out by one run in the seventh game.
Yeah.
Same way with the '86 Red Sox. Later, he was no longer a member. He was at the White Sox. They were one strike away from beating an outstanding Met team. And look at all those Brooklyn Dodger great teams until they finally won one World Series against the Yankees and broke through. They were deprived because sometimes you're playing against a team that's just a hair better. Even in football, we see it with the 49ers. They haven't won this version of the Niners hasn't gotten over the top. They barely lose to the Kansas City Chiefs. I mean, there's such a little difference between winning and losing. Someone's got to win and someone's got to lose. And I guess if you want to have the theory that the better team always wins, yeah, but the team that loses, sometimes you're in a year where you're just going against a great team,
Yeah.
and that was, the misfortune of the 1975 Red Sox.
Maybe you could, maybe. Oh, go ahead, James. Sorry.
Was he a first ballot Hall of Famer? I mean, 24 years is a long time to play as a catcher.
Yeah, he was a second ballot, actually. Yeah, he got in, but it's, I don't pay attention much first, second ballot, even though I do get caught up a little in the silliness. I mean, we hear now, unanimous choices. Mariano Rivera is the first unanimous choice. I mean, these are idiots who bring this stuff up. Like Babe Ruth wasn't a unanimous choice. So we even going to dignify these morons who didn't vote for him. The same way we see now, LeBron is only 4-6 in finals and Jordan is 6-0. Why wasn't Jordan to 10 finals? Because they got eliminated before getting to the finals. So they hold it against LeBron for elevating his team further than they should have gone in getting to the finals. I mean, the immaturity and the one voter who didn't vote for Jeter to get into the Hall of Fame. I mean, these guys' names should be made public. I kind of feel, they're doing it to kind of be cute. I mean, who could not have voted for Willie Mays unanimously to be in the Hall of Fame? I mean, it's ludicrous that someone wouldn't have voted for Willie Mays. Either they're blatant racists, or they're just trying to create some controversy, or they're idiots. I kind of feel, I don't know what to say. I mean.
Yes.
The pitching staff back then, Jack, one more thing on the Red Sox. Tiant, Spaceman Bill Lee, Wakefield.
Yeah.
Was that the three?
Wakefield was later.
Okay.
Louis Tiant, Bill Lee, They're the primary guys. But I'm glad you're making this point, Matt, because I was talking earlier, 11 years with the Red Sox, 13 with the White Sox, but he elected to go in as a Red Sox. And listen to what you're talking about with Fisk. You're talking about the Red Sox more.
Yeah.
You're thinking of him more as a Red Sox, even though he had a couple of less years. Sometimes it's not an easy call. You give a player choice. Mike Mussina, for example, he played, what did he play? 18 years in the big leagues. And when he got inducted in the Hall of Fame, 8 of the years were with the Yankees, 10 with the Orioles, and he didn't pick a team to go in as.
Right.
Which team he's going to represent, because he had a tiny bit more pedigree with the Orioles, but the Yankees are the famous team to go in as,
Right.
And then you have a player like Dave Winfield. He had, I think, a similar amount of years as close as a Yankee and Padre, maybe a year, 2 more as a Padre. I'd have to look it up. But the Padres offered Dave Winfield $1 million if he goes as a Padre. So he took the money. I'm not saying I blame him, but it's what is. If you guys had a choice, to go in like one or the other, it's sometimes not an easy choice to pick, between the two. Look, Reggie Jackson, he played his career, I think 9 years or something with Oakland for their franchise, or maybe 11 total. If you guys could look it up, 5 years with the Yankees. he went in as a New York Yankee instead of an Oakland Athletic. But Reggie Jackson was a great athletic. They won 3 championships when he was with them. 3 championships. He played years long as an athletic, but Reggie likes the New York limelight more, and he had that 3-homer game. And I'm not blaming him. It was a better fit because Reggie's considered like a Yankee icon. I mean, because of his 5 years here, but really he had more. But really, he should be in as an Oakland Athletic.
Yeah, I agree.
But they let him make the decision. But Gary Carter wasn't allowed to go in as a New York Met. They made him go in as a Montreal Expo. But when we think of him as both, I mean, what could I say? Not an easy choice sometimes.
So I got a quarterback, former Patriot quarterback, Steve Grogan. Now I remember Steve Grogan a lot growing up. I mean, he was for a quarterback, he was one of my favorite players. If I was, when I was watching him play against other teams, he did have some big games. He was a tough pocket quarterback, and he wasn't scared to run against any defense. He was an NFL passing TD leader in 1979. He was a passing career yards leader at 26,886 yards, rushing yards 2,176, and 35 rushing touchdowns. Steve Grogan was just, I mean, to me, was like a workman ethic, right? He went out there, he'd go out there and he'd lead his team. He took over for Jim Plunkett, who was a Heisman Trophy winner. Took his place. Jim Plunkett left. He led the Pats to 11-3 record in the first playoff season in Pats history, defeating the defending Steel Curtain. I mean, you're going against Mean Joe Green and Jack Lambert, and he led him to beating them. So, I mean, not only tough, pretty accurate, not scared to run the ball, like I said. He ended up beating Oakland in the regular season, but lost to them in the playoffs 24-21. That's what kept them out of the Super Bowl that year. Let's see. And Grogan had 12 rushing TDs, a record not broken until Cam Newton broke it. He had 12. Cam Newton had 14. This is how athletic that guy was. I watched Keith Angle talk to a historian on the Patriots, and of course that was one of their favorite players, along with Stanley Morgan. John Hanna, the big guard on the other side of the team on the offensive line. So the Patriots were really a really good team. A lot of people don't realize how good they were back in the 70s. So if you had a choice, James, right, and you've got Derek Carr, Steve Grogan standing next to each other, I mean, who you taking?
I mean, if you're telling me this is a guy that had the stats that held up before Cam Newton broke him, I would definitely like Steve Grogan more than I would Derek Carr, especially now that I know what Derek Carr is playing for the Saints.
James. But in a year or two, I advise you study the quarterbacks in the draft if you got Grogan. He's okay. Don't misunderstand me. He's okay, but he wasn't, to me, ever a franchise quarterback. Like if the Giants are going to need a quarterback next year, if they could get a Steve Grogan, yeah, he could play well for 2-3 years, but he's like, he's a better version of Daniel Jones. Don't get me wrong, okay? He's okay. But as I recall, correct me if I'm wrong, when the Grogan was with the Patriots, who got crushed by the Bears in the Super Bowl, and he was Tony Eason's backup.
Right.
Steve Grogan. Okay. And that should tell you something. I mean, that he was developed ultimately into a backup. He just wasn't a franchise quarterback. I mean,
but Jack, you're the person that said that Derek Carr is probably the best backup quarterback that's played in the game right now. I mean, wouldn't you not? You wouldn't say you wouldn't take Grogan over Derek Carr?
Grogan and Derek Carr, if I had them both, okay, I would have to sit down with the assistant coaches, go over stuff. I don't like quarterback competitions. I'm not into it. I'm not certain. I mean, I don't like Derek Carr at all, but he can win you some games. Same with Grogan. Grogan did some good things. I mean, Nick, Mac mentioned Tyrod Taylor. Was it before the show? I forgot when we were kidding around. But yeah, I would take Grogan over Tyrod Taylor in the long run, of course. But I'm sorry, I'm comparing him to another Patriot quarterback. I like Drew Bledsoe clearly better than Steve Grogan. Clearly better.
I would agree
I
with
think
that.
Drew Bledsoe, if I could have Drew Bledsoe if I'm the Giants and he could be my quarterback going forward, I'd grab him. And I ride with Drew Bledsoe for the next, going forward, put it that way. I wouldn't feel as comfortable with Steve Grogan doing it. I would kind of look for more, permanent fixture for the Giants than, Steve Grogan. I'm sorry about it, Mac. I know you're profiling him. Steve Grogan has done good things. I'm not anti-Steve Grogan, but
Oh, yes, you are.
I wouldn't feel comfortable with him as my franchise quarterback.
You mentioned them playing the Bears. Tony Eason got his wrecked. He got wrecked that game. And Steve Grogan's the only one that came in here and threw a touchdown against the Bears. So, I mean,
it was 46-10. It was meaningless, Mac.
That's something to him. It means something to the team, Jack. I mean, it does mean something.
Okay, I know it. Steve Grogan said before that game against the Bears, he didn't know what he'd get into play at quarterback at all, and he said he'd like to get in at least one play for special teams so he could, because it's special being in the Super Bowl. He had a good attitude, Steve Grogan. He wasn't a prima donna. He didn't cause trouble. Unlike Daniel Jones, and I'm not necessarily condemning Daniel Jones for this, when he was asked to play the scout team in practice and he got demoted, Steve Grogan was the type who would have played the scout team, did what he had to do. Not that I wouldn't have done the same thing that Daniel Jones did. I may have requested a trade if I was insulted the way he was to play, the scout team, which was interesting, guys, because Tom Brady commented on it in the broadcast. And he was kind of critical of Daniel Jones in the sense that Tom Brady said, look, you do what your team asks you to do. You got to support your teammates, the guys in the locker room, the whole bit. And Brady gave himself as an example when he was at Michigan. He was asked to do a lot of things he didn't like doing, like playing scout teams. But there's a difference involved when you've been made the starter and you've been the starter a while and then you get demoted. Tom Brady hadn't achieved status as a starter yet, and then he wasn't benched. Tom Brady wouldn't have been back at Michigan. He would have gone to the transfer portal if he was able to, if he was demoted to that point.
I agree. So that's Steve Grogan. I also want to talk a little bit about the greatest fan bases. And there's a lot to choose from. You would, of course, have to say Green Bay, the Lambeau Leap. I mean, the stadium itself, just playing there, that would have and of course, they run the team. So that's the only franchise that actually runs its own team. The Pittsburgh Steelers, the Steel Curtain, travel real well. So I would put them up there. Of course, maybe the most generous fan base would be the Buffalo, the Buffalo Bills, their fan base, given to charities, other teams. I mean, they're quite a fan base. And I'd have to also put in there the New York Knicks. I mean, year after year after year they lost, and year after year after year they sold out. And there's something to be said about that. So, and the prices didn't come down either. I mean, you paid the price to go in there.
Well, the Yankee fan base, I could make an argument is the best of all, because any game where the Yankees on the road, it doesn't sound like a home game for the team that's at home. You go somewhere like Baltimore, the Yankee fans take over the stadium anywhere. I mean, they're showing up. So I can make that argument. I think the sports are different. Football's different. It's easier to travel. Look, I was watching some of the Knicks game against the Charlotte Hornets yesterday at Charlotte. And at first, I didn't realize it was a road game for the Knicks because I kept hearing a lot of cheering. You know, and I'm looking at the court and saying, this doesn't look like Madison Square Garden. It didn't click immediately because of the amount of cheering for the Knicks that you're hearing.
Yeah, but I mean, in football, I mean, for the Yankees, there's Yankee fans all around the world, Jack.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not like they're traveling from New York to LA to watch the Yankees. There are Yankee fans input there. So that's part of the reason too. It's like Dallas, right?
But do they have to necessarily travel? Can't fan base be living all over the world and having Yankee fans all over the world and it being the universal type, thing? They don't have to get on a plane and travel necessarily to be the greatest fan base. But if we're going to specify it and say which franchise travels the best, that's a different question. Now we're talking about the Packers, we're talking about the Steelers, and I'm not sure who else, but they would head the list. Do the Bill fans travel? They travel fairly well. I mean, and if you talk about the greatest fan base just in their stadium, and confine it to like one area, maybe you can make an argument for the Bills. Okay, there. Maybe you can make an argument for the Browns? Are they staying loyal to their team or not? I'm not sure. Right now,
the dog pound used to be really, really good. The dog pound used to be really good. Used to. Yeah.
You know who I think has the greatest fan base at this particular moment? Just at this moment, the Detroit Lions. I mean, I think they have to get to the Super Bowl. There's no getting around this. They have to get there more than any other team because their fan base has been hysterical this year. I just feel that this has to be it for the Lions. I think I said it to Mac before. It's more important to the Detroit franchise than any other franchise to get a championship. It would mean more to them than anyone. I mean, because the Cleveland Browns aren't close, so forget about it. It's not meaningful right at this moment because it's not realistic, and they understand it. But the Eagles won one not long ago. I understand how wonderful it would be for the Chiefs to three-peat, but if they don't, big deal. They've had 3 championships in the last 4 years. Right. But the Lions just got to grab it in the worst way.
Talk about it. Go ahead, James.
Well, gentlemen, don't you think that not only having a great fan base, or deciding who has a great fan base is just judged by how you see them or how loud the stadium is, but maybe by their monikers, like you mentioned, Mac, the Pittsburgh Steelers. They have the terrible towel. I mean, that's one of the biggest things there. And then you also go all the way out west to Seattle. They have the 12th man. The 12th man, during their heyday, they were really a big deal. And during their championship years, it was a big deal.
During their heyday, right now, I mean, I don't see any advantage anymore with Seattle. It used to be a huge advantage.
Yeah.
But I mean, other teams go out there right now, and it's not really a big deal to play against Seattle anymore in that stadium. So, that's what I think about that.
Well, how many NFL stadiums are really an advantage for a team? Maybe Green Bay, because you talk about the cold. So maybe that, somewhat of an advantage over there. I just don't see it, as being an advantage of a team's coming in well prepared, functioning. It's minimal. I mean, I check every week the amount of home teams that win. And if you check over the course of the season, what is it, like 52%? I'm just guessing. It's not a big advantage. Years ago, the NBA used to be an incredible advantage playing at home. And it's not an advantage on any sport, I mean, it's minimal where you play. But people buy into it. Like the first 2 games, the team's going to be on the road. Oh, they just want to get the split. Why? If you win the first game and you lose the second game, I'm very upset getting on the plane going home that I only split after winning the first game.
Well, there are some exceptions. I mean, like last night, Georgia won a 5-time overtime against Georgia Tech. That was their 30th home game. It was 8. Oh, excuse me. That's right. It was 8. It was 8. Yeah, and that was their 30th home win, a streak. They got a streak going right now. So I guess there's exceptions. I mean,
Maybe
but
in college football, perhaps.
I think there's
A
bigger.
little
I think there's bigger home field advantages in college. Definitely, Jack.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. I won't argue the college football thing about the home field advantage, but you guys really think the NFL, it's a big advantage? I mean, I could see if you're playing at Buffalo, yeah, the cold weather, the fan base, it means something. I don't need to minimize home field advantage in a sense saying that it doesn't mean anything. It means something. If the Eagles, for example, we talk with Pags about it, if the NFC Championship game is in Detroit, it's going to mean something. The Lions having home field advantage, the Eagles will have a little more to overcome as opposed to them playing in Philadelphia. But I think, we see too many home teams getting knocked off. Too much, you see it too much of the time.
Real quick, we didn't mention it yet. Eberflus gets fired. That didn't surprise me. I think it should have happened earlier, but they replaced the coach before the season's out with an interim coach. I think this here goes Chicago again. They're going to replace the coach, get another GM, replace another GM. Here they go again, just like they did with Trubisky and with Fields. So.
And if he wins with the interim coach, they've got a problem.
Yeah.
Because the silly fans are going to be calling for them to retain the interim coach. I give Sonia a lot of credit on this show. She admitted she was wrong with Antonio Pierce. And the danger was he was an interim coach. He came in, he did better than Josh McDaniel. Some of the players liked them, and there was a movement. Oh, you've got to keep him, Antonio Pierce. And it just hasn't worked out. And the same thing could happen at New Orleans, James, with the interim coach. What happens if they do well the rest of the way? They're going to sign him for a multi-year deal? Is he the guy? If you think he's the guy and you truly believe it, okay, but they get sucked into hiring an interim coach based on his record, what he did, not that he's the guy. And it really torpedoes the progress of a franchise by, hiring these interim guys, because it's like a quick wave of adrenaline and the team wins a few games that they probably would have won had they retained their old coach.
Maybe.
Yeah, look, I'm sorry. I don't think interim coaches are the answer. It's just they're pretty much Band-Aids, you're just trying to stop a leak. And I think that the situation with Chicago, it probably needed to happen. I mean, if you look at the guy's record, he was 14 and 34 overall, and you don't not acknowledge that was your fault. I mean, he decided not to fall on the sword. He just said that was the right decision that they made. You got to be culpable in that situation. He said, that's on me. I think if he did that, he'd probably still be coaching right now.
I don't know what happened. I know I was watching on TV with the sound of Thanksgiving, and I wasn't sure whether they had a timeout or not.
No.
Whether they did it, and I'm watching the clock going down and I'm getting frustrated. Like, what the heck? How much falls on Caleb Williams, the quarterback? Even though he's a rookie, should he have taken charge? I mean, I don't
think so. I just think this is on the coach, man. You got one timeout left. Look, I'm speaking from the sideline. This is hindsight 2020, but I'm looking at the screen. I'm screaming like, what are you doing? You got an opportunity to tie the game or win outright, man. What are you doing? That don't make any sense. My head was about to explode when I watched that. I just no, he needs to go for that. Yeah.
I agree. Same old Chicago Bears. To remind you guys, every Sunday before we come on, the Dr. Sem show is on. So check in before we come on. We've got we've got College Sports Huddle with Keith Angle coming up. We've got Till the Whistle Blows coming up today. Truth Be Told, Con Man, Penis Peninsula Sports and the open mic today. So we're chock full. And of course, tomorrow is going to be our big football show where everybody tunes in, loves that show. So anything else before we cut out, guys, that you got to say?
No, but yeah, I think you covered it pretty well, Mac, and with the coaching carousel, with the NFL and the quarterback carousel. I'm most interested now, me as a sports fan, the free agent baseball signings. There are a lot of good players out there, a lot of good players. And as a Yankee fan, this Juan Soto thing that's going on, is he going to be with the Yankees and the Mets? I think he's going to the Mets, and he's not replaceable. He's not. I mean, it doesn't mean the Yankees can't win without him. That's the key thing. But Soto himself, his bat, they're not going to get anyone slot in, do as well. But maybe they could get a couple of other guys, and the other players like Anthony Volpe are going to have to step up. And, with the Mets, what's Steve Cohen going to do? And some of the other teams, the Red Sox, will they sign Max Fried? Are they going to make some moves? And there are going to be some surprise moves. Where's Pete Alonso going to go? I'm sorry, James, you don't have a baseball team in New Orleans. So, you can't really comment,
No.
from New Orleans. Yeah.
New Orleans had a AAA team in the Zephyrs at one point in the 90s, and that went away.
But that's basically a baseball free agency. And
No doubt.
And I'll take Ohio State and give the points today in the college game. I'll give the 20 points.
20, yes, 20 and a half, Jack.
Well, I'll give the points. I think Michigan will get creamed in this game. Okay.
Yeah, that's what I heard. I think Michigan's going to be able to play a little closer than that. I don't think they're going to blow them out.
I do too. I don't think Penn State beats Maryland by more than 24 and a half. And I think Notre Dame does beat USC by more than 7.5. So, all right.
Okay.
Folks, have a great one. We'll see you tomorrow on the Big Football Show.